Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you all so much for tuning in today or whenever this may be. This video will be made available at your disposal via YouTube. And thank you to those who participated in the surveys prior to this podcast. You all play a large role in how we constructed this video. My name is Evan Ferretti, and today I am pleased to introduce a sports professional, a new father, and an incredible man that I had the opportunity to meet down in Cape May, New Jersey. Some good times down there. Mr. Chris Farley is joining me today to help educate our listeners about the industry of sports wagering, how to get involved, as well as some insider information from the expert himself. Chris, how are we doing today, my man?
I'm good, Evan. I'm good. Thanks so much for having me on again, man. Yes, we did meet in Cape May. That was a good old time after I got married, actually. So I was in high spirits, or actually pretty lethargic spirits, I think, when I met you guys at the pool. As you guys took care of us, I still really appreciate that and hope to see you back there. And I was talking before the show, Evan, I feel like I should have looked a little better for you for this presentation, but that's what happens when you have a 3-week-old at home. Things are kind of awry structurally at the house right now, but it's great to be with you, my man.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. I'm super stoked to have you on, and don't worry about your appearance, man. You got a new daughter.
I got the Cape May hat on, so I'm good.
So we can get into the agenda that we will be going over for today, so all of our viewers know what we're going to be going through. I'll start with some brief information on the industry and who is involved. Probably ask Chris a question as well, so he can give some insight on that. I'll then kick it to Chris. He'll give some information on how he started his journey, as well as how he's continuing to make use of his degree. We'll then dive into the bulk of this podcast, and that's really what you all wanted to get out of this. The 3 most voted upon topics that will be starting with basics of how to, and then we'll go into some forming perspectives, and as well as creating an advantage in a betting lens. And then finally, showing how to properly go about your social media and your online presence. They all play huge roles in your professional career as a wagerer. And please don't forget to ask questions throughout the live chat. We will have a brief Q&A here at the end. So let's just get right into it. Why not? What exactly is this industry and who is involved? So it really started when the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act was overturned in 2018. It allowed states to choose whether or not to legalize their sports wagering or not. So I'm located in Pennsylvania, where sports betting is legalized. The industry of sports wagering consists of both recreational bettors, those who bet day to day or from time to time, and then professionals who dedicate their time to analyze, predict, calculate, and then wager on a match that they're confident in. And most professionals even have an online profile, as I had mentioned, and it's important to their resume. It has become so large, the sports wagering industry, in such a short period of time. And there are still major aspects of this industry to explore. And I'm so happy that I had the chance to meet with Chris and have him introduce me to this industry. Time will only tell with what is to come in sports wagering. And it's very important to listen to those who have this lived experience in wagering. So let's kick it to Chris. You have been inside on this industry for years now. Please introduce yourself, give our listeners some background on where you started and where you are now. Take it away, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Evan. So I've had I guess everybody, right, has like a different way that they got to the gambling industry, especially these days, because it's pretty brand new. Right. It's we're seeing an influx, obviously, state by state as it becomes legal. Tons of money, obviously, pouring in. There's always that B at the end of the numbers because it's billions of dollars that are pouring into this industry. But it all happened for me right when COVID hit. I have a 9-to-5, pretty standard in the government. I'm a project manager in the government. It's a job that I somewhat enjoy, but it's not something that I get up in the morning all fired up for, right? So I was always looking for what's that next thing, or what is really my dream career future. And I went through a lot of different things to get there. I mean, I was in the Air Force out of high school for 4.5 years. I studied theology. I studied communications. I got my master's in public administration, which is what landed me with the government job. Did some acting classes.
Oh, wow.
My
Didn't know
dream,
that.
yeah, that's my dream at one point, was to be an actor.
Wow.
A little bit of filmmaking in there and stuff, but always a huge fan of sports. Always somebody who digested a huge amounts of NFL and NBA, and I would say probably, man, I'm probably close to 10 years now. I started to actually place bets on a site called Bovada, which is a foreign site, which, you can do that. That was before it was legal in the States, but as long as you use the foreign site, that's okay. And I just started really enjoying it. I started listening to podcasts, reading a lot of articles. And of course, at that point, it was less exposed. Now we're seeing this burgeoning industry where people are running to get in there. And there's a lot of stuff you can do in the space, man. I mean, if you're like a data minded guy or gal, you can get into the metric side and the statistical side of things, and try to change the industry by the newest technology or app. There are different forms of betting nowadays, right? Like micro betting is starting to become a little more famous, where you just like every bat, right? Like during a Major League Baseball game, you can bet on every single at bat, right? Is it going to be a strike, a ball, a hit? And there are people who are apparently really good at that, right? It's like the penny stocks kind of, right? You just kind of pay attention and you. So there, I don't think we can even get to all the different ways that this industry is expanding right now. But then, of course, you still have the traditional stuff, right? You got betting shows, betting articles. More and more, it's becoming involved with the sports themselves, right? We're seeing partnerships from the NFL, from the NBA. I think the NBA just announced a partnership that their players can, a rule that their players can form partnerships with betting companies. So
Wow.
it's becoming really integrated. And I think, for obvious reasons, these sports are seeing how it brings people to the screen, it brings people to their stadiums and arenas, and it makes it even more popular because we can all have something at stake while we watch, which we can get into later, Evan, but it could be something that obviously really takes a hold of you too. So, as a professional, and I do call myself a professional bettor, we can get into what that means a little bit more too. But as somebody who does this every single day, ingesting information, trying to put information and content out there on social media and on shows, I really enjoy it, but it is quite the grind. So I wouldn't say it's made for everybody.
Yeah.
I'll stop there for now. And we'll get into some of the other stuff, but yeah, it's been a long road for me to get here, man, but I'm very happy in the sports betting industry, and we'll see what comes of it.
And now you serve as a role for people who are inspired to become a professional sports bettor. And you mentioned some crazy things that I didn't even know. Acting school? Really?
Yeah.
Wow. It's like you were going to be the original Chris Farley, no?
Yeah, right. Well, you know what? And I didn't know if that was going to help me or not, right? 'Cause it's like I'm obviously not as funny as that dude, but it's a name that everybody recognizes. So, like, is that a good thing or not? But yeah, I mean, the acting industry is obviously pretty tough, pretty tough to crack into. There's a lot of competition there too, and But what's interesting is I think I'm combining a lot of my skills in the sports betting industry because I have that background in communications. So I'm on video. I'm writing articles. Social media obviously involves a lot of writing, right? Like ways to put out your content in a savvy way.
Right.
So I think a lot of different parts of my background have benefited me for one, understanding the way people work, because like a lot of diverse background stuff I feel like I've done, but two, the communication stuff that I've done, like you, Evan, that's probably the biggest skill that you need, because if you can't communicate what you're betting on or why you're betting on it, I don't think it holds quite the same value.
Exactly. It leads to not as much credibility.
Yeah.
And yeah, exactly like you said. And that directly answers the question that I was going to ask, how you make use of the degree. Obviously, you still make use of the degree in your professional career. And I'm using some of the courses that I took throughout my degree to assist me in personal branding, proper social media use, a couple things that we'll get to later on in the podcast. But it's just great to hear that we can both benefit from our experiences in our degrees. And I'm sure we all can. We can now get into what the participants wanted to touch on. All of our guests today, as well as the results from our surveys. So First, we can get into the basics of sports wagering. I briefly touched on how this market came to be, and Chris gave some information on the market as well. But here's some information on exactly what we do and how we do it. First, I wanted to really bring up the idea of bankroll management. This is very, very vital for any bettor. Really, a recreational bettor should even take this into consideration. But it's really not that simple. 1% of the dedicated bankroll is the quote unquote proper size to bet. You can choose any percentage from 1 to 5%, I believe. For example, if your bankroll is $1,000, your bet or unit size would be $10. May not be the most enticing way to bet, but that is how units and bankroll management can be represented even when someone has a much larger bankroll. Many different models represent ways of managing your bankroll as well. For example, the flat model consists of a bettor who consistently is betting the same amount on every bet that they find to be a profitable one. And there's other models like the confidence model that shows how the change in your bet size is representative of one's confidence level in a play. I'm currently working alongside the confidence model in soccer as well as baseball. So Chris, I wanted to ask you, what model do you use today? And have you tried a multitude of models?
Yeah, so I guess whenever I start handicapping a sport or I start betting it brand new, like last summer I did the WNBA, which is a very wide open market. I mean, if you compare it to something like the NFL, right, it's a really sharp, which is just another way of saying it's a really tough market to beat because the smartest people in the world are betting on the NFL every single Sunday,
Right.
Whereas in the WNBA, less exposure, but more opportunity. So when I start off a sport, I usually do a flat unit model at first, like just to be humble, right? Like I really don't understand the sport fully just yet, or how to handicap it fully just yet. But I really think if you're calling yourself a professional sports bettor, or especially if you're offering picks as far as a show or radio or like a service provider for premium picks, I think you kind of need to do the confidence model, right? And I've been sort of bullish about this because that's part of the offering as a pro bettor is that you're able to say this play, let's just say the 76ers and the Celtics tonight, right? Like if you really think the 76ers are poised to, showcase their talent against the Celtics tonight at -2, then maybe that's a 2% hit or that's a 3% hit, right? Because you like it more than just a 1 unit play. So I think, just like the stock market, just like investing in anything, right? You're picking and choosing with some degree of discrepancy because you are able to say this holds more value, this bet has a greater chance and a greater probability. And gaining that edge, like figuring out exactly what that edge and probability is, everybody goes about that in a different way. But in no world is every bet the same, right? Like that's not,
Right.
that can never be true, right? So because every single game has different aspects of it that either tilt in one team's direction or the other, or one player's direction or the other, and like assigning your proper bankroll to that and sticking to it is probably the biggest part of succeeding in sports betting. And I'm really impressed by what there, Evan, too, because the 1%. I mean, the 1% to 5% stuff. Not a lot of people actually exercise that and talk about it because it's really hard to do, right? I mean,
Right.
I would say probably most people have $100 unit sizes, right? But if that's or like $50 to $100 because it makes it more invigorating.
Right.
But if you're
Right.
going to play with that kind of unit size, then you should have a $10,000 bankroll. And
At the least.
probably most
Correct.
people who put 1%, or they call 1% $100, probably don't have that kind of bankroll. And what
Right.
will happen is if you have a few bad nights in a row, you're going to feel that severely on your bankroll. And then you're going to be putting more money in, chasing, etc. It's something that I've had to learn the hard way, and many of us probably have. But yes, practicing proper bankroll management, exactly like you said, exactly like you put it, is super, super important.
Exactly. Very important, and honestly, one of the bigger key aspects in betting career.
Yep.
And really, what sort of bets are there to make? going back to the basics of sports wagering, a money line, a spread, or a total. What do these mean, and what exactly are we betting on? For example, we can stick with the MLB. For example, the season just started up. Many different bets are available. You can bet on players to get a hit. You can bet on them to get a home run, or you can just keep it simple. You can bet the money line for a team, which means you are just taking them to win the game. The total represents the number of runs scored in the game for baseball, and you can bet on the over runs or the under runs. That's something that I like to look into when it comes to baseball. And the spread is how many points or runs will that team win by, or the underdog that's covering the spread. That's another term that they use for the underdog. Will they win outright as an underdog, or will they cover the spread, lose, for instance, by 1, but cover a run line spread? Those are some of the basic bets, basics of sports wagering. Chris, what would you say your favorite bet is?
Yeah, it's tough, but I'm always probably going to be a traditional sides better, right? So I want to bet on either the underdog or the favorite. And I must say, there's inherent value with the underdog, right? Because you're being given points. So that's a team that doesn't have to win. That's still something in my development as a pro sports bettor that I need to improve upon. I think I'll pull the trigger less on an underdog than I will on a favorite, because I think that I'm good at identifying where a favorite is in a very favorable position, and getting in on that line early, right? Like that's a huge part of it. You see a game like tonight, the Warriors are facing the Thunder, I think, Thunder or I think it's the Thunder, but a lot of information in my head every day, Evan. But I'm pretty sure it's the Thunder, and it's a really good spot for the Warriors because they just lost a tough game. They're back at home, but now it's up to like 8.5, right? So I'm not going to bet on that, but you could have bet on the Warriors, I believe, as low as 5.5 when that line first opened. That's a huge difference, right? That's 3 points of line value that you could have got if you bet on that early, if you like the Warriors in a good spot. So I like picking out lines early when they first come out, anticipating where the line is going to move. I think you need a lot of experience to be in that position where you can predict where it moves, especially in a sport like the NFL. And I would say probably second in the NBA. The NBA is really tough too, because lines will move in crazy ways, even though, you don't really know why. It's probably because somebody knows something about an injury, or maybe somebody resting or something like that. But that's probably still my favorite, Evan. But totals, if you can get a grasp on totals, that can be extremely profitable. There's a guy, Kyle Hunter, at Kyle Hunter Picks on Twitter, who does that about as well as anybody in college basketball and college football. I think his run in college basketball, he was like 42-12 or something.
Wow.
To like end the season. So he's built a little different. And if you can get an edge on those totals, I think that's something that I want to get. Of course I bet totals, but I don't strictly hone in on them. And I think that's a marketplace where if you really understand the tendencies of these teams and their pace and what they do efficiency wise on a game to game basis, you can really gain maybe even a more significant edge than betting sides.
You bring up some incredible points about line chopping, clothesline value, and paying attention to these sort of things. And that goes into the second point that our listeners wanted to get into, and that is forming a perspective to find an advantage in a match. So this is, in my eyes, this is what turns the wager into an investment. So when you place your interest of wagering inside of a framework that is advantageous, it moves you into that lens of investing. Now, what we are doing is wagering. It is a gamble at face value. But, almost like watching the stock market, like you said, bettors can watch players and they can watch teams play to pick up on their successes, their downfalls, and maybe even teams that just straight up dominate them. You can find advantages in that. And that all goes into another sort of thing, understanding game flow, team play style. And also just yesterday, we had the finals of March Madness, the height of the match and the environment of that match plays a huge role into the game. And this particularly plays a larger role within sports like baseball, basketball, and football, in my opinion. It can help you to form an advantage, for example, if a team is susceptible to left-handed pitching. And I found this particular point, understanding game flow and understanding the sport, it was interesting in the survey. I had asked, have you ever played a sport, to both students on campus and to my online profile? Um, the majority of them answered yes, that they had played a sport. The majority of those people that answered yes, that they played a sport, also the majority answered yes to placing a sports wager before. Now, I think that is most likely because they have, or they think they have, a further understanding of the game, although we know that a lot more comes into play than just knowing the game. Historical head-to-head data plays a large role in determining outcomes. It's especially important to look into this, if some teams really just do have the other team's number. And then finally, something that we had just touched on, injury reports, matchup advantages in the NBA particularly play a large role in line movement, something that we can also touch on. And as well as, it's just something that all bettors have to look into. Say they were going to take Jason Tatum over points, and he gets announced out before the game, and you already placed the bet. Well, your bet now is going to void because you just weren't paying attention. So it's something that you really, really have to get into and just pay attention to straight up whenever you are going to bet. You have to pay attention to a lot of these things. And that leads us into third and final piece of information that we want to educate all of you guys on. And Chris, more so than me, is going to be able to elaborate on this piece, but this is how to properly go about your social media usage as a career medium within the sports wagering industry. And this is great. This is something that a lot of bettors or recreational bettors are starting to do to try and get along this way of becoming a professional. And it's a good thing. It's a good thing that they try to gain a following in any sort. But I want to talk about some of the courses in my degree that have already started to help me build an online following in a small community of sports bettors, insiders, and writers. I took social media strategies, I've taken literature and sport, and I've taken theories of persuasion. All three of those courses have definitely and certainly impacted my social media presence, how I go about my messaging on social media, and many other things. My personal brand, that just relates to implementing one's characteristics and skills into the brand. How do you want to identify yourself online? I see bettors online nowadays using language like free and, maybe like a must play max bet. That's often a sign of either irresponsible gambling or just straight up immaturity. Right? You're going to want to find something with stronger language and stronger analysis if you're looking to trust someone online. That is something that you most likely want to avoid. But if you want strong networking, another aspect of the social media use, it's very important to find other professionals in this sphere and being able to collaborate and talk with them. By doing this, it creates this professionalism around your name. You use that presence as an opportunity and create credibility to educate others on what you know. It's very important to make use of those experiences and knowledge, and I could even go to Chris right here. How did you use networking or on your social media to your advantage, Chris?
Yeah, first, a lot of the things you just said are so true. There's a lot of irresponsible tactics on gambling Twitter, especially.
Yeah.
It could be pretty egregious. Or on TikTok, forget about it. It's wild. But yeah, I got lucky. I think probably everybody says that they get lucky in situations like this, but obviously it takes some bit of courage, right? I reached out to some guys I listened to on podcasts, and this was a little bit. Now, even today, I think this might be harder, right? Because there's just more shows, more viewers, more people interested. But this was about 4 years ago. I reached out to the owner of the Odds Breakers site, and he needed writers, on his website. And I was, really interested in making a dent in the industry, or just, like having my shot. And because of him, really, I owe him a lot, because his name is Kiev. He connected me with a lot of great guys and girls in the industry, and we kind of formed a community from there. Like, I got to meet Kyle Hunter. I got to meet Tony George, a longtime handicapper and radio host out there in Vegas. Las Vegas Chris. Some of these, really sharp guys and girls that have been in this industry for a long time. And I think, one, it's really important to form colleagues with people who do have respectable messages, right, to be sent out there, right? Like, they're trying to teach good tactics. They're not talking about those crazy, 15% plays, which, if that's the way you go about sports betting, maybe there's a profitable way to do that. That's not what I would recommend, but affiliating yourself not only with many people in the gambling Twitter or just the gambling space is important, but I would say more important to affiliate yourself with people who are not looking to just, put out content for the sake of content, for the sake of getting ahead, for the sake of just saying something like, this is my pick, without good quality context around it, and without preaching at least a little bit about proper betting tactics, right? Because it's just like anything else. Like, I know, even when I got into sports betting, it's like, this is cool. Like, you see it in, movies, you feel like a wise guy, right? Like, this is the kind of stuff that's in, like mob movies and stuff. Like, it's cool, or it feels that way anyway. But once you really get in there, you realize that, like, just like anything else, right? If you go to a bar and someone's feeding you, beers or whatever, that bartender has a sense of responsibility to not give too many drinks out to their audience, right? And especially not to send them out the door with that. It's the same thing on gambling Twitter, social media space, TikTok. There are many people who are teaching improper betting tactics, not talking about bankroll management, not talking about taking days off. I know we talked about that before the show, Evan, and it sounds like you're in a really good practice with that. That's awesome, because it shouldn't be just an impulse. It shouldn't be just like a habit that we need to have a part of our day, even though psychologically it has those elements to become a behavioral addiction. So it's something to watch and to stay self-aware about. And as far as the social media space goes, I'll just add, consistency, right? Like, always putting stuff out there. Like, I see you and your buddy Matt always putting stuff out there. You guys are on shows, you're consistent, you always show your records. Transparency is huge, right? Because how could you be trusted if you're never going to show your records? And I haven't had a great year in the NFL. I haven't had a great year in the NBA. And these are two sports that for all intents and purposes, I've dominated in the past, So it feels like it's a hit to my brand and my reputation a little bit, but in reality, it's part of the game. Like, nobody is going to hit at 57%, which in sports betting is really, really good. Nobody's going to hit at that every year. That just doesn't happen. And so even though it'll humble you, even though it's hard to be transparent when you lose in some of those tough situations, handle it with class, which is something that I can work on too, Evan. There are trolls out there who are waiting for you to fail, right? Yep. And sometimes I clap right back at them, right? Like, I said something the other day, like, to this guy, and I was like, I bet that you still live in your mother's basement. Like, I said something like that, but which I wish I could rise above that sometimes, but it does get annoying. You can clap back sometimes, but try to keep your reputation as classy as it gets, because increasingly our humanhood, like how people view us, is online, is virtual, and everything is traceable. So it's more important than ever to say the right thing, whether we like that or not.
Man, that is some incredible insider information, you guys. Please take that into consideration whenever you may be going to place a bet, or even just going about your daily social media. How do you want to represent yourself online? That's traceable, like you said, by anyone can see it. And, that's some really good information right there. I'm more than happy with that information as far as those 3 points go with what the participants wanted to get out of this. And that really just finishes up the main talking points. We can dive into the Q&A now. I see at least one comment. that has been posted. And then we can go into some other things. Before we were talking the show about a couple things. Let's see. Question from Matt. Thanks, Matt, for joining up today. Since you've been in the industry for a while now, have you taken breaks from your profession? I'm guessing this is a question for you, Chris. If you want to take this one.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely have. You need to. Although I'll just caveat it by saying this. No one's going to be perfect in the gambling space because it is such a stimulating activity that, I mean, it's a quick way to win money. Like who doesn't want to win money, So I've had my challenges with that for sure. I'm not going to get in this presentation with you, Evan, and answer this question that Matt's asking in a dishonest way. I remember last summer, I couldn't figure out baseball to save my life. Kept on betting it for quite a few days in a row before I taught myself to stop, right? But probably went a little beyond what I should have. Probably should have peeled back and done some preparation. So yes, I've taken breaks. You have to take breaks in this industry, or else you can do it every single day and it can control your life. There are relationships to attend to. There are other things in life. It's a beautiful day here where I am. I'm going to get outside, do some other things. When we talk, my wife is a psychologist, and we talk about this stuff all the time because it's very easy to put betting at the very top of your priority list every day because you can feel really good about it. You're making yourself money, your family money. You feel there's that instant jolt that is really hard to get from a lot of other places. But realize that just as quickly as you can win, you can lose, and you can lose a lot. Right. And betting without proper research and perspective and context about what you're betting on can get away from you really quickly, especially if you have some overconfidence. So I would say the most often time that I take breaks is when I realize that I don't quite understand these teams or this league or association like I think I do. And you got to take a step back. So yes, Matt, yeah. I haven't been perfect at it, but it's kind of a battle within yourselves, right? It's discipline and practicing calculation as a professional, not just doing it to do it.
Yeah, it certainly takes a toll. Anyone is smart enough to know that there are sporting events taking place every single day.
Every day.
And there is now this ever so booming industry of sports wagering. And, I had mentioned earlier, there are aspects of this industry that have yet to be tapped into or talked about. And I feel like the mental health aspect of sports wagering and even taking breaks is something that I don't see enough in the sphere of sports wagering, even online. You see people posting plays every single day, every day. But is there any talk about their mental health or anything that is going on outside of their life? It's very important to focus on the break. And, Chris actually mentioned I'm currently taking a break right now. I have an extremely busy week this week, particularly of school. But like you said, you take a break, you step back and, almost just relax fully, unload on anything that you need to, and just relax for a bit. It's so important, especially in this space. Thank you, Matt, for tuning in today and asking a question. I don't see any other questions as of right now, but I have a couple lined up just in case. I think we can even talk about this one. We touched on it a little bit. What are some of the best practices of sports bettors? We mentioned earlier looking at lines and looking at odds for a bet that we like, as well as, transparency, tracking your record, all huge things, your return on investment, and then obviously the close line value you brought up. Chris, what do you think some of the best practices are?
Yeah, well, we said a lot of them, like you said, but that early line shopping, I can't stress that enough. Of course, you have to know where the lines are moving, or at least have a better idea, right? Because why take a line if it's going to go in the opposite direction and give you more value, right? So, I would say observing line movement, before you place early bets on games, just watch the lines and how they move, because that at the end of the day, it's all about the perception of the marketplace.
Yep.
And really the perception of the marketplace is really the sharpest bettors in the world and what their perception is, because they're the ones that move the lines, right? Like the public, even though so many public bettors are in the market now, they're not betting the same amount. And the sharp betting community, which is basically the guys and girls who put in a ton of money with every bet, they're the ones that move the lines. So figuring out what their perception of the sport of the teams are is crucially important, because then you start to realize where the lines are going to move. So I would say that number one. And secondly, find a way to test yourself, or to put yourself in a position where you're playing devil's advocate with yourself, right? Like for me, I write out my picks, sentence by sentence, like a story, because I usually send my picks out every day, right? So I send my premium picks to customers. I will write 2 paragraphs sometimes. It took me, 15 to 20 minutes, expanding on my research, only to read it and be like, I don't like this. This isn't a play that I should put forward, because something, the marriage of all the factors, or the confluence of factors, isn't coming together the way that I thought it would. And in fact, maybe I'm finding some things in the research that are telling me that maybe the other side is the right side, or maybe there's just too many thoughts on both sides to not take the bet. So find a way, whether it's you have a model, an Excel spreadsheet where you're typing in data and facts that kind of give you the information to think about things. A lot of guys do that. I'm not a modeler. Of course, you have to leverage data, but I'm not a modeler. So I write it out, but find a way to put it in front of you so that you're looking at it in the most objective way possible, which is, I know, is really tough, right? Like I wanted the Eagles to lose the Super Bowl. I'm a Giants fan. But at the end of the day, I still thought that Patrick Mahomes was going to, be in a position to win the game. And that's why I bet on it. So I removed the objectivity from it, and it was a lot closer than I thought. I would say that's one of the most important parts, is training your mind to look at it objectively by implementing routine habits that make you think outside of your internal bias, because we all have internal biases. It's in there. You can't get rid of it. There's teams you like, there's players you like, there's teams you hate, there's players you hate. So you got to try to get rid of that.
Yeah, that's a very important point. Removing that objectivity and that bias that you have. I love the Steelers, and I would love to see them go to the Super Bowl. And I can tell you right now, I will not be putting any money on the Steelers to make it to the Super Bowl, because my football brain and my betting brain is smart enough to tell me to not do that.
I'll tell you what, though, the Steelers keep on having winning seasons, and that's something that I bet on last year, and that hit again.
Absolutely.
There's still, not that this is a Steelers presentation, Evan, but I'll just say the Steelers seem to be perpetually underrated now.
Yes.
And I would say, I think they're going to do it again, man. I think they're going to get to 9 or 10 wins. I mean, it's a really, really tough division, but don't count your Steelers out too quick, Evan. They're pretty tough. They're pretty tough.
They are a very tough team. I can't wait to watch them this season, honestly. I'm very, very excited. And I'm super stoked that we were able to meet today and talk over some of the points that we are familiar with and we have experienced already. And, I don't see any other questions. Let's go ahead and wrap up this podcast. Again, I thank the participants of the surveys, our special guest, of course, Mr. Chris Farley, and the viewers for making all of this possible. I would like to give a special thanks to my professor, Dr. Susan Wyzorek, for believing in my vision, as well as Dr. Merrill McGinley, who made it possible for Chris and I to meet down in New Jersey. We hope to leave you with something today that you did not know coming into the video. And I'm very happy that we now have an episode encompassing the public scholarship that I hope to attain. Chris, I give you my utmost appreciation for joining me today, and I would love to keep in touch with you, my man. A final thank you to all of those tuning in. Bet responsibly, and don't forget the talking points that we emphasized throughout the episode when going to bed. Ladies and gentlemen, have a great rest of the day. Thank you, Chris.
See you, Evan. See you, everyone. Thanks.